Hello and welcome to the Gamers Tavern. Yes, we are back from hiatus and ready to bring you even more gaming goodness than ever before. To start off, I want to let you know that the next couple of episodes are going to be from our archives. These episodes are ones that, for whatever reason, we didn't release in a timely manner when they were recorded. So this episode was recorded back on December 23rd of 2014. Yes, it's over a year old. So there's a few things, a little bit of weirdness going on where we bring up games like Torg or Rifts, where we don't mention that Ross is currently working on the new edition of Torg and the new edition of Rifts that's built around the Savage Worlds game engine. We also bring up Larger Than Life, which was Michael Surbrook, our guest, his Kickstarter. His Kickstarter is actually completed now, and the book is out. So we've got links to that in the show notes if you're curious. But even with all that, this is an amazing episode with guest Michael Surbrook on the topic of long-term campaigns. And speaking of campaigns, did you know that the Gamers Tavern Shadowrun live plays have restarted? You might not know if you don't follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Gamers Tavern Show, or subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/meetinatavern, because they're video live streams. We're streaming every Friday live starting at 7 p.m. Central Time with new episodes of the Gamers Tavern Game Table Shadowrun run by our GM, Brendan Ginsimer. And if that's not enough for you, we're going to be adding a lot more content to our live streaming channel, including in-character playthroughs of Borderlands 2, a live stream of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines with commentary from actual Onyx Path freelance developers who work on the World of Darkness game, a challenge where I play through various horror-themed games in an attempt to find a horror video game that is, actually scary, and a whole lot more. Expect more announcements coming throughout the month on our schedules. On top of that, we'll be mixing in older recordings from our archives that we haven't released yet during the hiatus with brand new recordings. We've got a brand new book club show coming in a couple of weeks. We've got some special episodes like the one that's going to be coming out in just a couple of days with myself and Ross talking about the new Star Wars film, The Force Awakens. God, that's a lot of stuff. So without further ado, grab a drink from the bar and take a seat at the table in the corner while I tell you just a little bit about Audible. It's a new year, and I know that many of you have decided to start reading more as your New Year's resolution. Don't let that one fall by the wayside. Reading is very important, whether it's a nonfiction book to learn new skills or just a fun novel to help you relax. And audiobooks are a great way to do this, as you can listen at work, when you're exercising, during your commute, or just sitting on the couch with your eyes closed, letting the narrator take you to another world. If you sign up for Audible at audibletrial.com/gamerstavern, then you can get a book for free. That's right, completely free. Even if you cancel, you get to keep the book just for trying out the service. I actually got The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss for a Christmas present, and I've read it over a dozen times already. I've got a paperback copy, I got a Kindle copy, now I've got the Audible copy, and to be honest, it's almost a different experience because, hey, I actually know how to pronounce quoth now. And you want to know something cool? It'll actually sync via WhisperNet. So you start listening on your phone at work, you go to your computer when you get home, you switch to your tablet in bed, it's going to save your place every time you pick up right where you left off. And if you have the book on your Kindle app or on your Fire tablet, it's going to sync to that too, so you can switch from the audiobook to the text anytime you want. Just go to audibletrial.com/gamerstavern and get your free book now.
Hello and welcome to the Gamers Tavern Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Watson.
And I'm Daryl Mott Jr.
And tonight we have with us a good friend of mine and a game designer and artist, Michael Surbrook.
Hello.
Welcome to the show, Michael.
Glad to be here.
You know, I just realized that we have been friends for about 12 years at this point.
Okay.
I first became aware of Michael way back in the day, probably in the late 90s when I was in the Army, because he was running pretty much the Champions website, which was called Surbrook Stuff. And I have often credited Michael for sort of keeping that torch burning and allowing the hero system to survive through one of its darkest periods, because he was the guy sort of leading the charge on the internet with his page, Surbrook Stuff. Michael, can you tell us a bit about what Surbrook Stuff is?
Surbrook Stuff is a repository of hero character sheets created by me and others for everything. It is so big that at last edit, it had 8,000 elements in it.
Jeez.
Because I haven't converted it to a C yet, fully converted it to a proper CMS, so it still uses the old flat file nested 1990s style website creation method. There are literally hundreds of character sheets for everything. Anime characters, comic book characters, characters from the movies, characters inspired by songs, original characters, characters inspired by odd images that show up on Facebook and the internet. The running joke on the Hero message boards and the Hero forums is, does anybody have a character sheet for X? Well, have you checked Mike's site?
How long has Surbrook stuff been going for?
1996 or 7. It is in its 15th or so year. And in 2015, any readers who understand Drupal, I am more than willing and happy to take your help, because I'm migrating it over to a Drupal platform to make adding new material easier and to make searching and archiving the website that much easier.
Okay, so now you've been on the show before, Michael. That's correct?
Yes.
I'm going to just ask you to give us a brief gaming character sheet, which is going to be the way that you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, where they might know you from, in the context of the gaming character sheet. I'm going to guess once again that it's going to be a hero sheet.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a hero character sheet.
Okay.
I'm definitely a talented normal, which means I'm built on about 125 points. I used to be a little bit more expensive. I used to actually have some sword fighting skills and a lot of medieval reenactment skills, but those have kind of gone away as old age has caught up with me. And as Ross said before we actually started recording, I had less gray in my beard, and I didn't sound like breakfast cereal when I got up in the morning, as the body goes snap, crackle, pop. Definitely have good skills in hero knowledge, hero character creation. Based on feedback this year, my PS game designer writer skill has definitely gone up a few points.
That's excellent.
Oh, it was 2014-15 should be some very good years for me. And that means for Hero fans, very good years for you.
Now, you've been working on a big project for Hero lately, which is the Fantasy Hero Complete. Isn't that correct?
Woohoo.
Yes, it is. That is the fantasy answer to Champions Complete. It was funded by Kickstarter, and I am very pleased to say that as of this moment, this recording right now, we have finished the book and sent the files off to the printer, and at least one person has reported downloading the PDF.
Now, for our listeners who don't really know probably what Fantasy Hero is all about, can you kind of explain what Fantasy Hero is, or maybe just how it's different from like your typical D&D or Pathfinder game?
The major difference is that it's the power of the hero system. You can create whatever you want. There are no classes, there are no levels, there are no level caps. And this allows you to play any sort of fantasy game that you want. One of the things that I talk about in Fantasy Hero Complete is you can play your token-ish fantasy where you have, your pretty standard set of dwarves and elves and hobbits and halflings and orcs and goblins. But you can also simulate the fantasy of Chinese wuxi novels and wuxi adventures. You can simulate the Greek heroes. You can simulate the Irish, mythos and heroes. So you can have guys who are pretty normal, armor, sword, shield, run around, fight owlbears and stuff, or you can have guys who are running along ridge poles and lifting up buildings and throwing a spear through 10 guys at a time, and anything in between.
Now, you just said something interesting there. You said the Irish mythos. That actually kind of reminds me of like a combination of Cthulhu and the ancient Celts. You would have, instead of Cuchulainn, you'd have Cthulhu Culainn.
When Cuchulainn had his madness come on him, that would be a pretty good way to describe him.
Oh.
And Daryl groans in pain.
My head hurts from head desking.
My job here is done. All right, so now Fantasy Hero Complete as a book, though, it's not just going to be a toolkit, right? It's also going to take us and give the reader ways, here's some suggestions on how to build some things that you want to make. It's got a lot more than just the toolkit, is what I'm getting at.
Yes. For example, in the section of powers, I talk about how to build a couple of different magical devices based on your special effects. There is a set of samples. There's actually a whole sample magic system that I'm actually rather pleased with. I was influenced, I think, a little bit, not by Vancian magic, D&D Vancian magic or such, but a little bit more like Roger Zelazny's Mad-Wand and Changeling magic. And actually, I will admit the phrasing, I was also influenced a lot by Matt Wagner's Mage. Magic is a river, and you're dipping into it and altering the flow with your will. So that was the magic system I came up with, which was actually very modular. So in fact, if you want to be a Vancian mage, that's one of the options. I just tell you how to do that. Just add this limitation, and boom, you have a fire and forget mage.
Okay. And I've always thought that one of the neat things about Fantasy Hero is it kind of removes a lot of preconceptions that come with things like D&D and Pathfinder. It's a way to play a fantasy RPG in a way that I think a lot of people have never really seen.
I agree. The setting, in fact, there is a sample setting that was funded through the Kickstarter, which I'm very pleased with. Mainly because I got to take something that I'd written for my own amusement, and the guys at Hero said, "Yeah, we can use that. That sounds good." So my fanfic became a campaign setting.
That's awesome.
There'll be an adventure run for that at Gen Con for one lucky backer who paid for the right to have me run a game for him, and 5 other people who, according to Hero Games, will be drawn from Gaming Notables. So, in fact, I may lobby for certain people on the show to be in the game.
Oh, well, I would definitely enjoy that. I've played in some of Mike's games before, and they've always been fun. So, you've given us your basic gaming character sheet, and our topic tonight, of course, is going to be about long-term campaigns. And we're going to get back to that because we're going to ask you a little bit about, I want you to think about the things that you've done in terms of long-term campaigns. But before we get there, we're going to talk about what we've been playing lately here on the show. And as always, I'm going to start with my co-host, Daryl Mott.
Because we're recording this just before the Christmas holiday. And, we are doing what we're playing lately, right?
Merry Christmas to all our listeners. And yes, we are recording right before Christmas Eve. This is December 23rd, 2014.
Sorry, my cats were doing something. I zoned out for a second. So we
Put it on the internet.
I missed it. They ran behind a box. That's why I couldn't. But yeah, we're recording this right before Christmas, and my little cousins' kids have been talking about this game. It's something about Freddy in a like a Chuck E. Cheese type place, and you're a security guard. It sounds really fun and uplifting. I'm really looking forward to giving it a try this weekend.
I don't know anything about what you just said.
I've never heard of that game at all.
Now there's a game online that's basically it is one of the creepiest goddamn games I've ever seen in my life.
Can I tell you it has a sequel?
It does. I actually
made a sequel already.
Yeah, that's the one I actually got to play around with a little bit, was the sequel. Oh my Jesus Christ! No, never again. Nope.
What is the name of this game for us?
Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yep, it is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I couldn't remember it either off the top of my head. But yeah, oh my, you're a security guard at an overnight place where it's kind of like a Chuck E. Cheese sort of family pizza place, except the animatronics come to life at night. And all you have is a flashlight and a music box to keep them at bay. And you hold and you have to pull a mask down over your head so that you look like one of them, so they don't kill you, except the one that will kill you if you don't flash the light at them. But if you flash the light, it attracts the other ones. And it's just creepy shit, man. It'll freak you the hell out.
It's kind of like Night at the Museum, but awful.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
it's a resource management game where you have to balance all these different factors to survive.
All right. Yeah. So that's what you've been playing lately.
But I've also been playing Pathfinder, and I did get to watch, there was a live stream that Cat9 and a couple other people did from Runner Hub on Reddit. And they live streamed their game of Shadowrun. That was really cool. It was like their prime runners. And Cat9 was playing someone called Kitten, who was a mage. Who was absolutely nothing like Molly Mayhem. Until the final confrontation when she blowed everybody up.
Wow.
Like, it was like Saul and the Halloweeners bad.
Oh, for any of our listeners who have heard the Shadowrun actual play, just wait till you see Saul and the Halloweeners, because holy cow.
Yeah. But, so we got that. I think we did air that one.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that one's up already, but yeah, that's what it was like. But go ahead and check out. I don't have the Twitch channel with me right now, but I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. I believe they've got it archived on there, and they're going to be putting up an edited version as well. So check that out. And if you're interested in jumping on an organized play for Shadowrun, Runner Hub at reddit.com/r/Runner Hub.
Okay. I'm actually going to go next. I haven't been playing a lot lately because the holidays are just horrible for trying to schedule anything. Role-playing wise, I actually haven't been playing anything. I've been kind of working on the Birthright game in the background, but I did get a chance to play some Xbox games, and I've tried out Grand Theft Auto 4, which I didn't really enjoy very much. And then I tried Grand Theft Auto 5, which is like way, way, way better. So big thumbs up for Grand Theft Auto 5.
That's like the Grand Theft Auto 5. That's the Sopranos meets Breaking Bad one, isn't it?
Sort of. I mean, I haven't got too far into it. Honestly, playing both of those made me wish there was another Saints Row game instead. Because I really enjoyed the Saints Row games way more than I have the Grand Theft Auto ones. But there you go. And on top of that, of course, I've been playing through Star Trek Online. We're in the winter event now. Q's Winter Wonderland. And it's crazy, as always. And again, if anybody out there wants to get together and make a fleet for the Gamers Tavern, don't hesitate to contact me. That's what I've been up to lately. I'm hoping to play some more games very, very soon. And of course, been publishing some more Shinetar books. We got a book out called Godstrike Tempest, and we're getting some more products on the way even now. We got some being written by Ed Greenwood for Shinetar, which is really exciting. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike Surbrook. What have you been playing lately?
Computer-wise, I finally completed a classic. I succeeded in defeating Destroyer in Borderlands. So I completed my first playthrough of that. I was decided to play that because, of course, they released Borderlands pre-sequel, which I completed my first playthrough of that as well.
Oh, man, I'm so jealous.
I had a great deal of fun with that. And I leveled up my Gunzerker to over level 50 and am now rampaging through Captain Scarlet's adventure after going through Mr. Torg.
Of course.
Because we all want pecs and explosions.
That sentence had too many syllables. Apologize.
Yeah, somebody was like, I didn't like Mr. Torg's adventure. I was like, what is wrong with you? On the tabletop side, we are playing through an Ironclaw campaign, Did
you wrestle a shark wearing a bolo tie?
Well, you might ask me who was wearing the bolo tie. Answer, yes. No, actually the line from the Ironclaw game was, I think I just drowned a bear.
Now, what's Ironclaw for the listeners?
Ironclaw is the anthropomorphic fantasy RPG. For all of those familiar with Savage Worlds, it uses a similar die mechanic. All your stats and your skills and stats are all determined by die size, D4 to D12. And instead of class, you have professions instead of classes, and you have species instead of races. So I am a Red Fox Ranger. We have a Tiger Barbarian, a Horse Paladin, a Badger Priest, a Bat Burglar, and another Tiger who's a spy.
Interesting.
And we're trying to save a kingdom from invasion from soldiers from we now found out to be a parallel dimension. So it went from fantasy to kind of strange.
Are the enemies honey badgers?
No. Although one of the players was going to be a honey badger before he switched.
Okay.
We're also playing Fantasy Craft, which is our Sunday game, and we just gained a couple new players. And one of the guys, and this is actually kind of funny, one of the guys is familiar with Pathfinder and D&D and so on. But I think he shucked all that to the side when he found out that one of the starting races in Fantasy Craft is a giant.
Nice.
And he was just like, I get to be a giant? And he thinks that's the greatest thing ever.
Okay. Well, I want to shift into our Tavern Tales section now. We're going to ask you to give us a story of a very memorable die roll.
Okay. I, in fact, will go right back to our Fantasy Craft game. As I mentioned, we have 2 new players, and people who are familiar with, say, D&D or Pathfinder may, often think, hey, I rolled a 20, that automatically means I get a crit. But in Fantasy Craft, you actually have to activate your crits by spending your action dice or action chips, just like the GM can activate your ones as failures by spending his own action points. So we're fighting some crypt somethings.
Crypt keepers?
Something like that. I actually wrote down what they were, and there's a standard enemy rule in Pathfinder and a Mook rule, which is they don't have hit points. They just fall over when they fail a death check. And if you roll a 20 and spend an action point, they automatically fail a death check. So I roll a 20, and I'm telling one of the new players, I said, hey, look, see, I rolled a 20. I can hand the GM an action chip. I hand him the action chip, and he fails a death check, and he falls over. And the GM goes, unless he has toughness, in which case you have to do it again. So I said, oh, well, for my second action, I'll hit him again. Bam. And I rolled a 20. So as you can see, I can take my action chip, activate the 20, hand it to the GM.
As I was saying.
and I do believe that in between all of that was the comment, well, if I roll another 20, I can, yeah, here you go. He's gone.
Now, how long have you guys been playing that game?
We are in our second set of sessions. We played Fantasy Craft from levels 1 to 5, which took a little while. Took a break for some Call of Cthulhu, which was fun. And we're back to Fantasy Craft, and we should be leveling up again soon. So we've been playing it. I think we're in our 11th, 12th session now. Maybe more. No, we're more than that. We're like we're definitely over 10 sessions.
Well, that's good.
It's been a lot of fun.
That actually has a lot to do with tonight's topic, which is long-term campaigns. And one of the things I think we should define early on is, what is a long-term campaign? And I'm going to ask Daryl to answer that question. Daryl, for you, what do you think a long-term campaign means?
When I get 3 sessions in a row, almost.
Have you never played a campaign that lasted more than 3?
Well, no, just that I seem to have this somewhere between 3 and 7 sessions section where if I can get past that, the game will last 6, 9, 12 months. But if I can't get over that 3 to 4, 5 session hump, it dies. And it doesn't matter if it's what the excuses are. It doesn't matter if it falls on Christmas Day and so no one can show up because everyone's doing their family stuff, or everyone gets Ebola. It doesn't matter. If I can't get that 4th session, the campaign's dead. But
okay.
Usually I would define something long-term as at least probably 8 to 10 sessions in a row with the same characters in the same group and more or less the same group of players.
Michael, do you agree with that?
Well, now that I've taken a note of some of the games that have run that long, sure, that sounds like a good number because it gives me lots of possibilities to work from.
Like I said,
I was actually going to say in my mind, a long-term game isn't mostly number of sessions. It's like we've been playing this game more than a year, I would say. So that, depending on how you do your sessions, that could be anywhere from 12 to 20.
Yeah, but I think the reason why I kind of shy away from time as a measurement is because you can have games that go so long in between sessions, right? Like you could have a game that plays once every 6 months.
True.
And is that really does that really count? I don't know. It depends.
Well, I'm sorry, but I do think actually, if you're breaking double digits, if you're getting the 10 or 12 sessions or more, yeah, that's actually these days getting pretty long term because my Friday night group, it's 6 to 8 sessions. We switch GM, switch game engine.
That's a follow-up question I wanted to ask was, what do you think is a typical length for a campaign? And in my opinion, if I can start us out, I think that right about 6 sessions is that sweet spot where most campaigns that I've been in, that I have experienced or I've seen, that's where they typically stop, is around 6 to 8 sessions.
A lot of this is colored by growing up in the late 70s. So D&D games our role-playing games as a whole, the revelation of, hey, I can have a pre-planned arc and we're going to have a beginning, a middle, and end and actually draw it to a close, never came around. You would have Champions games or D&D games that have been going on for years, sessions that were maybe hitting triple digits because nobody ever thought about how they could do a complete campaign arc as opposed to story arcs. It wasn't until I met you and gamed with you with some things like Shadows Angelus and such that the idea of the GM already having an end game in mind and a complete beginning, middle, end arc for what he wants to have happen overall was something very new to me. I was very used to open-ended games that just went on until people got bored, and then everybody decided to do something different.
Interesting. Well, I do want to return to a lot of the things you brought up there, but first I want to make sure that Daryl gets a chance to chime in here. What do you think a typical campaign length is in terms of number of sessions, Daryl?
Like I said, for me, it's really difficult to pin down even a session number because it varies so much depending on where I'm at, who the group is, and a lot of cases, how old I was at the time. Is when I was in my teenage years, my early 20s, I was in college, we had nothing better. We had classes and then we had free time. So it was easy to get a group together. It's like, okay, we're going to play every Friday night because we got nothing better to do because we live in a small town and none of us drive. So we all hang out and we play for 2-3 years straight. But then when you get into your later 20s or your 30s, it gets a lot harder to schedule something that regularly because real life interrupts. The older you get, the more responsibilities you have. So right now, I would say I feel lucky if I get 6 sessions out of a single campaign. I usually, when I plan out mine, I try to go in arcs of 10 sessions. Whenever I plan out my campaign, it's like, okay, here's my idea for the first arc. It's going to be 10 sessions, and then it's going to have put in beats here and there, and I plan it out kind of like a season of a show along the lines of Buffy or whatever, where it's like, okay, there's an overarching plot, but each individual thing's a standalone, but it's going to tie into the overall plot here, and here. And that's just the way I do it. And so I usually go for 10 sessions is, yay, I actually finished the arc.
But I heard the number 6 in there somewhere too, so I think that we're kind of on the same page.
Because I never make it that far. I always hit that 3, 4, 5 sessions and then nothing.
Well, that raises a really interesting question. Michael, I'm going to throw this one to Michael. Why do so many campaigns stop after only a few sessions? And a few can be, anywhere from 3 to 6 or, as we said.
I think it's easier to plan for the short arcs than it is to try to have a long-term plan and to maintain the energy to run over the long term. I know that if I was going to run for my Friday night group, I can, I can say 3 sessions, 6 sessions. That's pretty easy to do. 12, 14, 16 sessions. That's a lot of investment of time and planning and energy. And if I'm just not feeling it, it's going to be, it may be like, look, I just can't keep it going. But over the short term, over 3 sessions or so, 6 sessions, I think you can keep the energy up and people are pretty enthusiastic about it. I mean, if the game really grabs people and they want to keep going, that's one thing. But I think maybe I don't know if it's just the way we think now, or, it's just interest isn't as there because there's so many things to pick from. So it's hard, we really have to have something special to keep everybody's attention. But I think it's just easier to work with those shorter arcs.
Well, I think you nailed something right on the head there that I want to talk about, and that's the energy level. Okay, and I've often thought that the energy level of the game is going to be the one thing that sort of determines whether it's going to live or die as a long-term campaign. Now, this is kind of a tangent. I know we're kind of wandering down this road, kind of off the beaten track here, but I think
a tangent on Gamers Tavern. Say it isn't so.
Yeah, I know, really. But seriously, I think it's that energy level I think is critical, and this is where I come from. Is I think why so many game sessions stop at 6 is probably because of that energy level, because people get distracted by something else, new shiny, game is out, or this other thing we haven't done for a while, or they'll be talking about it on a forum, or they'll just get together someday and say, hey, we haven't played Rifts in a while. And the next thing you know, they get really energized about that. So I think a lot of it kind of comes down to the energy level of the group. And I hate to say this because it really feels like you're singling people out, but I think the GM is kind of the guy who needs to put the most of that energy in. If you have someone who's really excited about running the game, I think that's going to carry over to the players.
In novel writing, there's something that a lot of people talk about. It's called the quagmire. That is the middle of the novel when you're trying to write something. The first 100 pages will come really, really fast. The ending, what the grand ending of your novel is going to be. It's that middle 200 pages that is a slog. You're waist deep in a swamp, quagmire stuck, trying to drag all these plot elements to the end. And I think that might be where a lot of the campaigns, or at least my campaigns, tend to fall apart, is they get all those adventure hooks right up. They get the big overall plot hooked in them right at the beginning. First 2 sessions. Yay. Awesome. And then they have to slog through all the middle part. Okay, so we have to go get 5 MacGuffins from 5 different places. And we got the second one. Okay, where's the third one at? And it gets boring because it doesn't seem like anything's advancing. They're just like, they're stuck in that quagmire trying to get to the end goal, but the momentum dies.
Well, momentum definitely, I think that's definitely true. Michael?
Actually, I think I find I'm agreeing. The analogy about actually novel writing brings up something that I've often said about Stephen King, which is his short stories are often much more energetic and tightly constructed than his novels, especially when you see things like Under the Dome and all that, because you've only got so much time to tell your story. So I think it applies for game mastering. If you're running a short game, you can really craft it pretty tightly. You can really make sure everything's there because you've only got so many elements to deal with. But when you start extending it out, you've got to sort of start stretching or redoing. You've got to try to fill in what's going on, and you've got to try to recraft that sequence of events. It's a different plot, it's a different enemy, it's a different adventure. But once again, you've got to kind of do this a couple of times over, and it can get exhausting to try to have that level of detail. I mean, a Gen Con game can be, especially with pre-generated characters, can be ridiculously well crafted so that everybody has something to do. But you take that same campaign and you go from one session of 4 hours to 8 to 10, 12 sessions of 5 to 6 hours each. And there may be parts in there where you're just not feeling it because you just can't get that spark every single time you sit down at the table.
I wonder, and this is a question I want to throw out there, do you think that some of this actually comes from the players? And I mean that like a player kind of comes up with a character and they play him for, 4 or 5, 6 sessions and they just get, I think I've gotten everything out of this character I'm going to get.
You see that a lot with people who make kind of gimmicky characters. I had one guy in the Pathfinder game I ran for about 6 to 8 months where it seemed like every 4th session he's like, I'm bored with this character, I'm going to make a new one. And it's just because he kept trying to go for one concept. And when he got that concept nailed down, it's like, okay, there's nothing to it. His characters never had any backstory. They never really had any personality to them. That was just stats on a page to him. So that was one thing that probably, when you do that, not saying that's a bad thing, because I do concept characters all the time. But when you keep switching characters like that, it's hard to get that character attached to the world or to the plot even.
I will second that. There's a campaign that we've talked about a lot, and I know has been mentioned a lot on this show, Shadows Angelus. And when Ross was running it, there was a lot of energy going back and forth between the GM and the players. So I think when Ross was like, wow, I'm 16 episodes in or 18 episodes in, and, I've still got some more planned, but I think he'd sit down and he'd see the enthusiasm the players had. It would invigorate him, and then we would sit down and, Ross would start rolling the plot out, and we would see how, and it would invigorate us, and the players invigorated each other. So I think if you have a bunch of people who are just there to throw dice and move, a set of stats through the dungeon, collect treasure, they might as well be playing, I don't know, Skyrim, World of Warcraft, any other game, or Borderlands, where you can do the exact same thing, and you don't need to worry about another person. You can just hack and slash your way and try out your tricksy, gimmick character on your own. Because if you've got a bunch of guys who are playing cardboard cutout players who aren't interested in the plot, I'm certainly not going to be interested in running for them anymore.
Well, it's good. I think you said a couple things there that are interesting. Number one, we're definitely going to bring up Shadows Angelus a few times tonight, I'm sure. Number two, I think the thing you brought up that is about the investment in the character.
Yes.
And I think a gimmick character, one that's mechanically interesting, but not necessarily interesting in terms of the game itself. Yeah. it probably loses its luster after a little while.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing a one-trick, I found these feats that really let me exploit Pathfinder and D&D character, that's fine, but, you're metagaming there. You're just playing a set of feats. If you're playing a gimmicky superhero character whose gimmick is, I throw boomerangs or something, I mean, now you can have a lot of fun with that, but that's a style of play, and that's a different terminology of gimmick.
Well, I'm going to throw two more things out there. I think one of the reasons, two more reasons why campaigns stop after only a few sessions is because either the system or the campaign itself, like the tone or the group, are just not gelling after, 5 to 6 sessions is enough time to find out, right? If this is the group I want to play with, or if this is the system I want to play in. At least for me, that's something I have found. Is that also true for you guys?
Yes. The Friday night group, the reason why playing for 6 sessions, we have cycled through. We're playing Blood and Honor right now, and we've played Legends of the Wu Lin. And I know the Legends of the Wu Lin game just ground to a halt and got migrated over to Hero because the system turned out to be just very unwieldy for us. It took forever to run a fight. It took forever to actually do anything in combat. And it was just decided this is not the system we want to use for what we're trying to get at.
You had something similar to that recently, didn't you, Ross? A couple months ago?
Maybe. I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly. So
I want to say it was Rifts that you were trying to run a Rifts game, but the system it wasn't working, so you ended up switching to Savage Worlds.
Oh, I think that was not Rifts. I think that was actually Torg.
Oh.
And that was a few months ago, yes. We started out trying to play Torg. Now, Torg is very similar to Rifts. I can see why you made that connection there. We were playing Torg, and the rules not that Torg is a bad system. We've talked about Torg on the show before quite a bit. It's just that it was very, very difficult for everyone to understand how to play it. And Savage Worlds is just a much more accessible rule set. I think even Ed Stark would agree with that. I think he was our guest for the Torg episode.
I was going to say, it's not that we have anything against Torg. We did a whole episode on the game.
Right.
So.
Well, there's a setting specifically, but yes. Yeah. And the accessibility was a factor there where we switched over to Savage Worlds and just made it sort of easier for everyone to understand and grok what we were doing. So I think those are all really interesting bits there, but let's take a second and just make it really clear for the listeners. We're not here to bash short-term campaigns or say that one is better than the other, right? Because there's absolutely no reason why you can't have fun with just one game, like a one-shot. I've had so many great one-shots before. I've had great games that lasted only 2 or 3 sessions before, right? I just want to make it clear we don't have an agenda here by coming out and saying, oh, long-term is better, rawr. That's not what we're doing. That's not what I'm doing, right?
Well, actually, Ross, I can agree with you. When I decided to run for my Friday night group, I actually ran Ironclaw and Feng Shui, and each one was 2 sessions, so I ran 4 total sessions. I said, I even came up, I was up front. I said, look, guys, these aren't going to be very long. Give you a taste of the system, show how the mechanics work. I don't have a lot of major plot, but nobody minded. And on the flip side, Ironclaw both went over very well. But the one thing I was very pleased with was how fast and how appreciative the players were of Feng Shui. It was kind of a revelation of how the game worked for some of them. And it was kind of nice in the second session to have the one guy go, okay, I've got this figured out now. I can declare that these guys are standing on linoleum. I was like, yeah. And I can use my shotgun to bounce the pellets off the linoleum. And the special, instead of killing them, I'll just take them all out with every success I do. Nice. It's like, perfect, go for it.
That's the gunsmith Katz method right there.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I love that show.
So now, I'm glad we all got that reference.
Are you kidding? I have all the manga.
Yeah. So we're saying that short terms can be good, yes. Right? But I think that obviously what we're talking about tonight is kind of what is the difference. What makes the long-term campaign difference, and why is that good, and how can you get there? It's kind of where we're going with this.
Yes. It does have 2 really different feels to it, a short-term versus a long-term. A long-term campaign feels a lot more like, at least a good one, feels like a really cool TV series. I brought up Buffy the Vampire Slayer already.
Yes.
Firefly, yes. Or Supernatural. Constantine seems to be going that way right now.
Well, when you say long-term and Firefly in the same sentence, you make some people's hearts hurt.
I apologize. But but I'm talking about is sort of more of a long form fiction. If you look at just those 13 brilliant episodes, but
although if by our definition, though, 13 sessions would be a long-term campaign.
That's why it was in my head that way, because I'm thinking of these one shots or 1 and 2s as a movie. So I can still sit here and enjoy a feature film without it having to be without having to have 18 sequels after it. Matrix.
So Ross will understand this reference because you said movie, Daryl.
Mm-hmm.
My thought was then Rod Curry's superhero campaigns that he ran at Gen Con was the Hero System version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because each one was a standalone movie, but he ran them Gen Con after Gen Con. So you had a series of interconnected movies that ran into one long sequence.
I think we talked about that on the superhero episode, didn't we?
I think we did. Yeah, there's this guy, Rod Curry, and he ran these games at Gen Con every year for several years. And they were all, just like Michael said, they were all interconnected, but they were also standalone. And it was a really interesting draw, not only for that, but also because his games were very heavily prioritized meaningful choices, moral dilemmas, and character development over combat. And, using your powers and stuff like that was something you did, but it typically was not the key to the game. They were really, really well done. And I want to say, clearly on the show, thank you, Rod, because those games were amazing and it taught me a lot about what's important in a good superhero game.
And I do want to go back to something Mike said a while back when he was talking about the Shadows Angeles campaign that you guys played in, where they're... I didn't get to play in it, damn it. I want to talk about it too. But
okay.
what the thing he brought up was how the players would get more energized, and that would make you more energized in running the game, which would make them more energized. And it became kind of a feedback loop.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the great things you can have with a long-term campaign, but it's also, we were talking about things that can kind of stymie a long-term campaign. If you get that quagmire sense, that can become a feedback loop where if the players aren't really into the story, they're just kind of, like Mike said, moving stats around a dungeon, and that puts all the onus of the plot on the DM or the GM, and then he gets bogged down. It's like, do I have to write more stuff for this to make a story out of it? And then it leads to burnout a lot.
Well, burnout is definitely a thing I wanted to bring up as a kind of one of the things about a long-term campaign is that it can definitely cause people to have burnout. There can be moments where you're just like, I don't want to deal with this anymore, right?
Or it's like, I just cannot come up with anything new this week. Can we just play a one-shot of something else, and then you play a one-shot, and then you forget the campaign?
It can be like that. It can be a thing where I just want to take a break, and the next thing you know, you'd never get back to it. Well, I'm sure that's happened before too, right? I'm sure there's been people who have planned out like a 20-session game, and then they get to session 6 or 7, and they're like, I need a break, and it's a term that Michael used, momentum. You lose that momentum. And the holidays, I think, actually, November and December are like the worst momentum killers of the year when it comes to that. So when you're planning out a campaign and you are trying to do maintain momentum over the holidays, that's something to watch out for, right? Is try and find a way to keep people involved and remember, keep sending an email every week. Hey guys, don't forget, we're playing again. Stay with me here.
And there's
funny you should mention email.
I was gonna say the second biggest killer, probably, especially when you're in late teens, early 20s, is finals.
Yeah,
when you're in college.
That can definitely be a thing. I had, it's been a long time since I've been in college, but that's true. Michael, I'm sure he's got something he wants to talk about right away. But before we get there, I want to ask another question. So we talked about that this is not necessarily commercial for long-term campaigns, but what makes the long-term campaign different? What makes it awesome?
I can answer that. I've either been or run, by our definition, 3 long-term campaigns. My own Kaze 5 setting ran for several years, 30 some odd, 35, 40 turns, monthly turns. So you can do the math there.
That's a play by email, correct? Play
by email. And it was all story driven. So people had character sheets and so on, but a lot of it ended up being you submitted moves or you submitted ideas, and the coordinator would kind of get feedback what he felt was a good idea, or he would draw people together and say, okay guys, and it was more like cooperative fan fiction than a game, but it still felt in a game fashion. But what happened was I ended up with this wealth of background material, of world building, of characters and concepts and ideas.
He's not talking to you, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apparently I'm not going through my mixer. I'm on there. No, my cats are fighting. I'm trying to tell them not to. I muted my mixer, but apparently my sound is going through my computer right now. My apologies for interrupting.
Michael's looking so confused right now.
I'm so confused.
I thought I was supposed to be here to talk.
Sorry.
So wait. Okay, so before I go back to what I was saying, and I'll start over, I just have to state the funniest fallout that I have seen so far of the North Korea hack Sony meme is the cartoon that says, well, if North Korea tells them to put Firefly back on the air, I won't complain.
My favorite was, okay, Kim, now tell them to bring back Firefly and get Michael Bay off Transformers.
And the other one was, and give Spider-Man back to Marvel. So
we just dated this podcast.
Okay, so as I was saying, and the thing is it actually turned out to be a huge benefit when it came time for me to do do the full 6th edition source book for Kaze 5. I had 5 years of material to look at and cherry pick from the ideas and comments and concepts from the players I like best, as well as NPCs where I could go, hey, can I include this guy in the book? And pretty much everybody was like, you willing to do that? Sure. So the other one was The Well of the Worlds, which I ran for 16 sessions. It also let me build the world and gave me ideas and sort of filled out concepts once again and gave me kind of a neat, long story arc. And that when I wrote it up for Haymaker, the Hero APA, I felt pretty pleased with it. It sounded very pulp action-packed and adventurous. So I thought I did a pretty good job there. The third one was Shadows Angelus, which initially, for the first one, note that stress, ran for 24 sessions. And it is now, the second one ran for 7, and then one ran for 9, and another one ran for 9. And when you total that up, you're hitting 40 sessions by 3 different game masters of one setting. And the timeline is advanced, the characters have evolved, because the time between each arc a campaign is like 5 to 10 years. The players grow, the characters that were in the earlier games are still there, they're older, some have died off. There's, you now are in a living world, and it's just, it's something that when Ross sat us all down, almost 10 years ago, Ross, 2005-ish.
Yeah, I know.
None of us could have predicted that our Saturday group would be talking about another game, and we're all talking about what characters we're going to play and so on. But it just continues to live, and it continues to feed on itself. So we bring new people in, and they're like, this is really awesome. I love this setting. This is great. I want to, so that enthusiasm feeds on itself. But you can also say, yeah, we've got all this background that you can work with now, things that players have come up with, things the GM has come up with, things that he's accepted and incorporated and added in, and then that we've grabbed and run with.
Daryl, have you played in a really long-term campaign?
It depends on your definition of long-term. It's not going to meet you guys for sure, but I have run a couple of games that lasted almost a year. I ran one that lasted over a year, and I have played in one that went off and on for about, I don't know if it would count as a long-term campaign because it wasn't really the same group of characters. It was mostly the same players, but it was the same world, and previous adventures affected future adventures, even if it wasn't the same characters. So like in this one, in campaign that we played a year before, we assassinated this evil king. When we come back, there's now chaos in that kingdom, completely different group of players, but there's chaos in that kingdom because there was a power vacuum and everyone's now trying to vie for the throne. It's like Civil War. Mm. So I don't know if you would count that one or not, but that one we played off and on for about 3 or 4 years.
I would.
Yeah, I'd count that. I've been really lucky with running games actually running and playing long-term campaigns in the course of my career, I think I have played in or ran at least a dozen long-term campaigns. And I got to say, for me, like my personal preference is I really enjoy the long-term campaign. I like the idea that I could take a character from one place. I've said this often. Take a character from one place and have them end in a very different place. Give them an arc.
Character development.
Yeah, character development. And I think the long-term campaigns really, in my opinion, I feel give me more of an opportunity for that than a lot of short-term ones that I have been in. So I tend to, just for me personally, because of my preference, put a lot of weight on the long-term ones and a lot of investment into them in terms of this is something I really enjoy. I honestly didn't even think about it for a long time. For a long time when I was playing games, and I've been playing role-playing games, for 30 years now, for Christ's sake. But there was a time, especially in high school, we would just play, we would do 6 games of one thing, and then we'd play 6 games of another thing, and it was no big deal. And we just kept doing that, kept doing that, kept doing that. And I think it was like right after graduation, really, my friend Brad, he came to me and he says, what we have never done is taken a character from first level in D&D all the way to 20th. He's like, I'd really like to do that. And that's when I first started thinking about like what makes a long-term campaign different. What that investment and that time and that character development, what that can really mean. So to me, it's a meaningful thing to say it's a long-term campaign, and I'm really, really pleased to be able to say, I have had like a dozen of them in my time. And that's one of the reasons why I was really excited about tonight's topic, because I think it's a really important thing to get out there and talk to people and get them thinking about it, what the differences are and what maybe they can get out of. Maybe if they're like me, or maybe if they're not like me, that's okay. But there's always going to be something, I think, special about a long-term campaign.
Yeah, anytime you run a game that long, if everyone's at least half-assing it, honestly, you don't even have to try that hard, but you're still going to have more of an investment because you've spent so much more time in it. You're more connected to the world, to the events, to the NPC characters. You actually care what happens to this town that you get. It's not just a resupply station. That's where Inga the barmaid is. She hates your guts, but she still gives you a discount. Yeah.
Michael, do you have something to say about investment, the idea of investment for a long-term campaign?
I know I'm invested in a couple of long-term games because you're right. It's sort of what Daryl was saying. It became more than just stats, or it became a place. It became people. It became characters I identified with and characters that I wanted to see grow and develop. And it becomes real to me, and it becomes something I want to grow. I want to see it grow. I want to help it grow. So I don't want to set it aside. And when somebody says, hey, we're going to run something else, or I'm going to run something set in this setting, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to be part of that. I want to continue to see what's going to happen next, what the next guy's going to do with it. So the past investments in the character pays off in future enthusiasm.
I'll give you an example. I knew that I was invested in the Daybreak Rising game, and this is the one we played with Yar. It was a fantasy hero game with Stephen Furlani was kind of like the central figure in this game. He was playing a knight called Sir Patras Nolman. And we had ended up all kind of playing characters that revolved around Patras to some extent. And I knew the moment that I was invested in this game because we played maybe 3 or 4 different sessions of it. And I got to the point where I was starting to plan out what I wanted to do to help Patras reach his major goal. I believe we were at some manor house, and there was an upcoming discussion of a tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what I'm talking about here?
Yes.
And my character made a decision to assassinate one of his rivals. And I was like, I am invested in this game. I am doing this because I'm excited. I want to, see my impact. I want to see the impact of my meaningful decisions on this story.
And I got to say, on the flip side of that, behind the screen, one of the most rewarding things ever is that moment when you realize the players are as invested in the story as you are, or the characters. I still remember that game I was running at the store. This is the one that lasted over a year, where we'd done the first major arc. They'd beaten the big bad, and then I had put them up, and they didn't know what was going on, but I put them up against kind of like the anti-party. I took like the main guys who were showing up every single week and made inverse versions of their characters. Like the lawful good monk had the lawful evil monk on the evil party, and so on and so forth. And they kept kind of bumping into each other without actually having a direct conflict, except for this one guy. I just decided to play with a character and made a character that multi-classed 5 times. Just so I could do it. But every single encounter they had, they ended up killing the guy, and every single time he'd ended up coming back. And the third time it happened, I still remember the character going, "Why won't this motherfucker stay dead?" And it was just that moment I realized, okay, they're invested. They want to know what's going on here and why they hit this. Because they kept asking, they immediately started brainstorming after they saw him come back the third time. How is he still coming back every time?
Yeah, this is a problem. We need to figure out how to stop this.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have a story you can tell us about the moment you realized you were invested in a long-term campaign? Was there a moment you knew you're like, I am invested, I am fully interested in what's going on, and I want to see what happens next?
Well, let's go to the one that I have the most vested in, Shadows Angelus. And I'm trying to think. I mean, the smart-ass answer is pretty much from session 1. On the flip side, I was pretty invested from session 1. It was I'd never been with a GM who ran like you did. That was a different. You were a much more engaging game master than a lot of people I'd game with. It was also the group, the characters. It was the concept. There was a lot of things going on that really pulled me in, and I think by about 6 sessions, I knew, man, this was just pretty awesome. And and when you would ask us or challenge us with things like, I'm going to summon the Raven and ask it a question. And in order to answer the question, I have to tell it a secret. And you're like, okay, so you got to tell me something nobody else knows. And I start thinking, and I'm realizing, much like writers like Stephen King will say, I didn't expect the character to do this. I'm sitting there going, Jama. I just come to realize Jama actually is in love with the paladin on the team, even though she knows it's impossible. I've become this invested in the game and the character and the character's actions and how she relates to the rest of the party. But
no, that's a great moment. You had the realization you're invested when you were asked to sort of give up some information about the character you hadn't thought of before, and it caused you to think about the character in a totally different environment, totally different light.
Yeah, and it made me realize something where I was like, I think that's how she feels. That's how the character is.
It's that epiphany, that moment of realization, I think, that a lot of game masters love to see.
And it was actually when I was playing Chrysene in the most recent version of the game too, where I ended up telling the GM, she's not very happy, and I know why, because the character has a daughter, and I've become very protective of this fictional daughter that this character has. And people are trying to mess with the city. She's going to protect her daughter.
So yeah, investment's really important. It's definitely that moment when you say, yes, I am here, and this long-term campaign is important to me. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to investment. Now, something else that you got to have for a long-term campaign, at least I wouldn't say you got to have it. That's probably going too far. Something that, for me anyway, is important is the idea of story arcs. This is sort of the thing that makes the campaign really interesting, is that there is a story, there is an arc, there is a meaningful change in the environment that is typically that is caused by the players or is put into motion by the actions of the players.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry.
Please don't make this one of those nights where it's just me talking and you guys nodding your heads.
No.
Well, I was going to say something.
I'm actually really thinking about what you're saying, and one of the things I can say too is going all the way back to the investment and the motivation. If you're in a long-term game where it is obvious, or where the GM, there's 2 things actually I think that'll keep the players interested. One of which is if it's pretty obvious the GM is receptive to what the players' ideas are and will, say, yeah, let's go with that. Where the GM does a lot of, well, you tell me. So it shows that you're not just running around through somebody's, dungeon and seeing the sights. You're actually being more interactive with the world. The other thing is that when things that you do in the past crop up again in the present or the future. So you realize actions that you've taken have meaning or consequence. And because of I actually totaled up, Ross, 49 sessions so far of Shadows Angelus.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring up Shadows Angelus because this was one of the things that really made me say this is how I want to try to run other games, and I'm constantly trying to incorporate these ideas. But we would come up with stuff, and we would come up with stuff that wasn't even at the gaming table. One of the things that kept us invested in the game was something that we call blue booking, which is taken from Aaron Alston's wonderful Strike Force supplement for Hero System. And it was named after using blue composition books to keep notes in, which eventually they started to pass notes not from GM to player, but from player to player. And they started to actually run little adventures or interactions or dialogues of their own using the books while players talked to the GM or did other such actions. And with the internet, we've now start doing email interactions that we then send to the main mailing list. And things that we would do in that were just the players themselves coming to decisions, that the Ross would look at and grab or say, yeah, that's perfectly canon, that's valid, and so we felt freedom to make the world richer. The other thing is that stuff that we would do, Ross would take a note of. It's like another GM who, one of his most wisest things was players make the best adventure writers. He would take comments or things that we did, and it would show up later. And it made us feel more willing to do things in the future because it showed, hey, if we do something positive, this actually pays off in the future. If we act like a jerk, that will come back to bite us in the future.
So it sounds like you're bringing up two different things here, and I just want to quickly define and make sure we're talking about the same thing. It sounds like you're talking about continuity and agency. Agency being the ability of you to have a lasting impact on the world, and continuity meaning that things that change are then carried forward over the length of the campaign.
Yes, but I think both of those help with one of the primary ingredients of a long-term campaign, which is keeping the players interested and invested. Because if you're running through a game where the term that I think got bantered about was, I think we're just guest starring in this guy's fanfic.
That's usually a sign of not enough agency.
I have actually someone had asked advice of me saying, hey, I've got this DM that's doing this. What should I do? I send them a link to Amazon How to Write a Novel books and say, give this to your DM because I think this is what they're wanting to do.
Right. I mean, the other part is where you feel like you're playing tourist. We're just here to see the neat things that has been, that's plopped down in front of us, but it doesn't matter. We're not integral to the plot. You could take us out and replace us with a bunch of, stand-ins, and things will probably work out the same way.
You fools! You've captured their stunt doubles.
Yes. And in both cases, it's like, the GM is probably having fun because he gets to show off he or she gets to show off their setting, their neat NPCs, their monsters, their villains, their this and that. But the players often feel like they're just going through the motions. But if you feel confident that you can do something and the GM's going to go, well, the prime example for us is Jama figuring out to get to the vault an hour, and shutting the game down. I mean, having you willing to go, well, I'm going to have to stop here because I didn't expect you to do that. It really actually, that's one of the things I'm like, man, I felt so awesome. I felt like, when people went, when Jama says something, we listen, you're playing, it's like, why should I buy deduction? And Ross is like, why? You don't need it. The character, you've been playing the character, you've been deducing on your own. You don't need to buy the skill. But that really, it's not that I won over Ross, but man, I felt like, yeah, my character is just rocking. Let's keep going. This is awesome.
You felt you felt validated.
Yeah. Thank you. That's the term, and if you can, because It used to be, I remember Tomb of Horrors and other stuff where it was like, oh, it's me versus the GM or the GM, killer GMs. And did I survive? Or, I killed this many players. And I don't want to play that.
Whoa. You killed players?
As player characters.
Okay.
Somebody else said that. Yeah. So I think one of the things that's going to make a long-term campaign viable is the trust between both sides. Is that the GM trusts the players to have characters and invest in the setting and have characters that are integral or part of the setting. And the players can trust the GM to do things, change the world and try to incorporate those changes as they go forward so that both sides can feel, pretty cool. These guys are enjoying my game. They're enjoying my setting. This is awesome. They're liking everything I'm doing. I'm challenging them. They're rising to these challenges, and the players are like, man, this is cool. We're making progress. We're going somewhere. Things are happening. We can see change as we try to do it. And sometimes it's little things. Going back to, Shadows Angelus, I remember Ross was trying to, give us an idea of how miserable things were. We come into the paladin and the sorceress walk into a hospital. We see all these riot police and all these, normal, non-paranormal police that are just day by day, paycheck cops.
Sorry, I'm just picturing Groucho Marx with a cigar. So, a patient in the paladin walk into a hospital, eh?
A paladin and a sorceress, they walk into a hospital.
But like everybody's overloaded, nobody's helping them. And I remember, I'm the sorceress, and Nestor Rodriguez is playing the paladin, and we both have enchanted weapons that can cut through stuff pretty easily. A sword and a short dagger. We're like, so these guys, nobody's helping them with anything. They're vending machines. We end up cutting open the vending machines to start handing out drinks and snacks and everything. And somebody, Ross has one of the doctors or nurses complaining, like, well, you can bill us.
Rippy, and then later on, you understand this installation has a very high dollar value attached to it.
That's right. So, like 12, 14 sessions later, we go from single digits to in the 20s. There's our characters are all pretty much put on the most wanted list because there's a civil war going on, and one of us gets arrested, and Ross points out, well, they take your gear away, they put you in a cell, they give you this, and you don't get hit with tasers and beaten with nightsticks because they kind of remember what you did for them, and they're willing to cut you a little slack. And, it was like, and it was kind of that bit of, he remembers something from this many episodes ago, but kicks it forward and brings it around. And then he points to one of the other players. He goes, well, yeah, what about me? Oh, they would have beaten the crap out of you because you always act like a jerk.
Well, so I think what you're saying is continuity is more important in a long-term campaign than it is in a short term.
It is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's I think continuity is what's going to help a long-term campaign.
Well, not just more important, but more effective.
More effective, yes.
In a long-term game. Well, I wanted to go ahead.
Oh. And actually, it becomes even more important when you are doing something as Shadows Angelus has had 4 different arcs with 3 different GMs, because I'm running something and I talk to Nestor Rodriguez and I say, yeah, the new this player character that you've just met, that your character from the last campaign, who you're running as an NPC at the moment, is meeting a character from the new campaign. And you recognize something odd about this character. And I go, and he goes like, what? Well, you felt this energy, this holy presence before. When? Oh, remember that church that we were in Shadows Angelus 2? And he's like, oh my. And I was like, yeah, this character's part angel. Because remember the religious guys captured an angel? And he just flips out. And that's part of it right there. If you can carry the continuity over from campaign to campaign, much like you were talking about with, you killed the king, so everything's chaos. I mean, I think the players really appreciate that. They might flip, but they're going to be like, oh my God, he pulled that thing back. I remember that. Oh man. And it really, once again, it's all feeds on the enthusiasm. It feeds on itself. And it makes me go, yeah, man, I just made these guys like go pale. This is awesome.
Well, I think we could probably do a whole episode on validation or agency or continuity. I mean, a lot of these terms we're bringing up are really they're a lot more involved than we can spend a lot of time defining and getting into. But I think they're all important, and making sure your characters feel like protagonists, which is a lot of things that I think you were bringing up there.
Yes.
I'm
hoping I'm not rambling.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure and mention one thing that I found important to me when I was doing long-term games was the idea of a story arc, and just it can be a really short thing. And what I mean by a story arc for me, when I write up a story arc for a long-term campaign, it's typically focused around an individual character, and it's part of validation, and it's part of protagonist, and it's part of spotlight, because I think if you give each character something that's important to them over a long-term campaign, it will enhance the feeling of an overall, it'll enhance that continuity, because it's not just something that happened, it's something that happened to them, or it's something that happened because of them. It relates it more personally to an individual player. For example, when I did a good example is the Birthright game I'm running right now. And just about every episode, I'm doing like a short story arc for an individual character, or I'm trying to build in what they call plots and subplots. There's a lot of good advice on what a subplot is, in fact, in Strikeforce, which Michael mentioned. So I have an idea in my head where I'll try to build things around a character. Like I have a game of Birthright we ran just a little while ago that was based around my friend Bryant Smith's character. And there's a big thing we're having coming up with very soon that's going to kind of resolve this ongoing thing I've been doing with Bryant's character. And that's fine. I mean, it's not to say I won't ever come back to Bryant's character. It's not to say that I won't ever talk about him again. But he's going to feel like he had his moment, right? When this is over, he's going to look back, and if we have continuity, if we have something that calls back to this particular episode, I think Bryant's going to find it very investing.
Yeah, that's something that's really a strength of the long-term campaign compared to shorter or one-shots, is that you're allowed more time to put more focus on each individual character in the game. For example, if I'm running, say, I know I'm only going to do 3 sessions of this campaign, that's it, then I've got to make sure that each player at the table has their moment for their character to shine over those 3 sessions. So that's going to lead to a lot of things where, okay, this is player A and player B's character is the ones that are going to shine in this particular encounter or scene or whatever. But if I have a long-term campaign, I can focus a lot more time on each individual character. Okay, this is the main character in this one. It's all about their character, but it's not excluding everyone else. It's still involving them, and each other character is going to get a moment to shine later on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Speaking of characters, one thing I love about long-term campaigns is the amount of character development you get to do. I love the fact that you can take a character that starts out as I've said this before, and I don't want to keep repeating it, but you start out one place, you end up a different place. And I'm going to give you an example. I played in a game where we went from first level to 17th level. This was early 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. And my character started out as a farm girl straight off of an orchard. Okay, she was a fighter, right? That was like her one class. And by the time we got to 17th level, I had traveled the plains. I had made freeing slaves my lifelong goal, right? across the multiverse, right? I had become a foster mother to a goddess. And I had helped free an entire nation from the domination of an evil god. And you look at that and you're like, wow, I am so different now. I am no longer naive. I am no longer just looking for adventure. I have a goal and a reason in life and a purpose, and I know what this character is going to be doing 10 years from now, because I had this really long campaign that took me from one place and I ended up so different. Daryl, have you had something like that happen to you?
Not in quite as much fun of a way. Babysitter.
Okay, babysitter, yeah, maybe not the best example.
By the time this goes up, I don't know how many of the episodes are going to happen, but everyone knows I dropped out of the Shadowrun game because basically I felt like I was spending all my time trying to keep Babysitter a playable character, and it's been a long time. Brandon and I have worked out any sort of remote issues that we had over that, but basically it was Brandon had a different idea of what to do with the character in the campaign than I did. And that's where something we say all the time on here, communication is important. But I haven't had that much as a player because I've never gotten to play much, but I have seen it happen in characters in my games. For example, my friend James that I brought up several times before, he almost always plays rogues, and he almost always plays the same type of rogue. He plays basically the orphan street urchin every single time. So he almost always starts off this character as he's living on the streets, picking pockets just to get stale bread because he needs a couple coppers just so he can eat every single day. And then he gets swept up into all these things that happen, and it just grows bigger and bigger to the point where the last campaign he was in that I ran for any significant amount of time, his character was basically the savior of the trolls who had a cult following of full-out trolls in the middle of the Underdark that worshipped him as their savior, literally.
Oh, yeah, I remember you talking about this guy.
Yeah, he saved the trolls from basically being a food source. And he also had boots of spider climb. So the guy was basically hanging upside down in caves, sniping people in combat in the middle of the Underdark, trying to overthrow a drow plot to rule the world while being the savior of trolls. And he started off as little street urchin kid. And the character's personality kept growing and growing in confidence too. He went from really paranoid, really shy, didn't really talk much to, he ended up becoming, and this is more James the player than James the character, but I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt here.
Did he end up like, there will be one day the strength of men fails, but that is not this day.
No, right? It's more along the lines of, what are you doing? That's stupid. Get the fuck out of my way. I'm trying to take a shot. You get over there and attack that one while I take this one out.
Okay, a little more vulgar than Theoden.
Not quite.
Right.
Not quite. He never became a noble character by any way, shape, or form. He just got a lot more confident in being able to speak up and say, hey guys, you're doing it wrong. Do it the way I say and we'll live.
Now, Michael's got a character that actually had a very similar path. Jama started out very shy.
No. Actually, she started out
quiet.
She was quiet mainly because I was not going to try to. I'm not one of these guys who jumps in and starts. It's my personality. I mean, she did have the unrepentant show off, so she liked to use spells for minor things like straightening up her desk, taking showers, and cleaning the car. But yeah, she wasn't particularly. She didn't go around giving orders and things. She pretty much was the follower and wasn't certain what's going on. And I still remember the email of, what do you guys think? Where do you think we're all going to be once the campaign's over? And my comment was, I think John would make a good instructor at the XWAT Academy. And Ross and I both know how that character ended up.
Well, that's what I'm asking is, like, can you tell us like about her character development, right? Because over the course of 24 sessions, she changed a lot.
Yeah. She was so the reason why I picked, so that's a little background. So Ross comes and says he wants to run a Mystic Cops game or Magic Cops game like Silent Mobius, which was my biggest favorite anime manga back. And that whole genre, Hyper Police, Hellsing, the guys, the Mystic or Magic Police Force fighting strange monsters is something I really like. I find a lot of gaming potential in that. So my brain locks up and I have no idea what I'm supposed to do for a character, which is kind of ridiculous. So I ask, well, what's on the team? This. And I said, no magician and everybody's a guy. All right, so I'll play the female character and she'll be a magician. And as the game started out, she was pretty much she always was the bookish type. She had actually gone to college. She had, majored in theology and so on. And did a lot of research and such, and wasn't really a super powerhouse compared to a lot of the other characters. She didn't have a magic sword. She didn't have a mecha. She didn't have a big gun or all sorts of stuff like that. But as she got more competent, more capable, and as I grew in capability, and I became more confident and more familiar with the GM and the players, she started to become more of a force to be reckoned with. She started to research things, figure things out. I took notes like a mad person, presuming that she could remember a lot of this stuff. Started figuring things out, started offering suggestions and saying, we should do this. And the players and the player characters, started to listen. And the funny thing is that the way I played her as a person, so she wasn't, it's like she wasn't, no, I broke a nail, I must whine. And she also wasn't, oh, I hate men or anything like that. And I think some people said she came across really realistic, which made a lot of the other players protective of her. Sort of not like we have to keep her from harm, but more like somebody from, internal affairs was giving her a hassle. We should make that guy disappear. And the paladin is saying this.
Yeah, to quote George R.R. Martin, I've always been under the impression that women were people.
Yeah. So, this did culminate at one point in me in the middle of a play session. I really felt like we were being manipulated. So I grabbed the guy next to me, who happens to be Nestor playing the paladin, and I take him outside. I say, we've got to do this. Our time is being wasted. Something is happening here, and that's why we're here doing nothing. Now, that's not what I said, but I'm trying to explain to the listeners what I was trying to get across. And what the other players in the GM here inside the apartment is the paladin go very loudly, oh, shit. We walk in, I look over at the team leader and say, we have to go there. And he's like, okay.
He didn't ask any questions.
It was like, okay, Jama says we have to be at the vault now. We're going. We even not know. And then we get there and we managed to stop a guy from trying to smuggle out every mystic artifact being locked up, and that was that awesome moment I talked about earlier where, Ross went, okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to stop it now.
And by the end of 26 sessions, you had actually become the leader. Jama had actually become the leader of this organization. She
became director of the ex-SWAT Mystic Police Department, which was nothing in my radar. It was, I wasn't even 20 sessions in thinking that was going to happen, but we happen to have another mate. We happen to have Yars Underwood running Lieutenant Hemmelshot, who was a great manipulator and behind the scenes mover, and he decided, and actually he and another player character by the name of Grady kind of said, yeah, we're going to do this.
No, but what I'm getting at is that this character development, though, is something that couldn't have happened in a shorter term, or it wouldn't have had the same impact in a shorter term.
It wouldn't have felt natural. It felt forced. It wouldn't have had the same sense of wow. I think that when it was all done, when I look back and I'm like, yeah, I never could have predicted or expected that, and it was just mind-boggling.
Okay, let's ask another question here, because I think we have said some great stories and stuff, but the question I want to ask is, are there some games that are mechanically better suited for a longer campaign than a shorter one?
First, immediately to my mind is D&D. There's a reason it goes from level 1 to 20.
That is certainly kind of a built-in guide, I would say, that kind of tells the player that these kind of things are at least possible. And maybe, it may not be necessarily what you need to strive for, but it definitely proposes that. Michael, can you think of any games that mechanically sort of kind of lean towards those longer campaigns?
Sure, Champions. Hero system. It's open-endedness, and the way characters are built, you can slowly or quickly improve and change and expand on your character from and just keep adding to them if you're willing if you're willing to work with it. It's much like D&D. You can continue to level up indefinitely. It just the threats can get bigger. You can go from the Fantastic Four kind of dealing with, well, actually they always kind of dealt with cosmic stuff, but
yeah.
The X-Men, where all 5 of them fight just Magneto, to 6 or 7 or 8 of them are out with the Shi'ar and the Brood, and they're getting engaged in cosmic issues over time as they get more powerful and more complex and more diverse.
Or Spider-Man going from fighting Stiltman all the way up to he was involved in the Secret Wars.
Yeah.
And then made a deal with the devil. But we don't talk about that.
That's right. And then became an Avenger and punched Wolverine out a window.
That was before the deal with the devil, but okay.
Oh, okay.
Fair enough. So I think we could probably talk about, in the broader sense, mechanical.
There's
games.
one other one that I really think, I don't know if it's so much built into the system. It kind of is, but definitely into the setting. World of Darkness really gives you rewards because of the fact that it's a little bit more of a story-oriented game in general. I mean, it's a storytelling game. They even call it that. But it really gives you more incentive to run those longer games where you have more interaction with NPCs, you're more involved in the world, all the political stuff going on that really plays out better long-term, I think.
Well, I would even go mechanically the old World of Darkness. Certainly World of Darkness in general is suited for longer campaigns because it has a lot of the background skills that are more useful in longer campaigns. And there's actually, at least from what I recall of playing Werewolf back in the day, there's actually some abilities that are gated based on, rank, which is kind of like a level.
Yeah, even in Vampire the Disciplines, you level those up. It's
right.
You can start off with a discipline maxed out at 5 for your generation, but you're basically spending every single free resource you have a character creation to get that 5. Otherwise, you've got to do it through experience points.
But what I was just going to say, I want to kind of throw this one out, believe it or not, to the listeners. If you out there are listening to this podcast right now and you can think of a campaign, if you can think of a game that has a lot of mechanics that are suited for a long-term campaign, please write in and let us know because we want to hear from you. How can you contact the show?
You can comment on the website at gamerstavern.org. You can also post on Facebook at facebook.com/gamerstavern. You can hit us up on Twitter at gamerstavernpc, as in podcast, or you can email us at info@gamerstavern.org.
You can also leave a review on iTunes. We look at those too.
Yep.
So please get back to us. Let us know what you think because I want to hear. I think there's so many games out there that probably, we just are not thinking of for some whatever reason that have great mechanics suited for a long-term campaign. And I'd kind of like to hear about what those are. But let's shift gears a little bit now because I think we've talked about, kind of defining the terms and talking about what makes a long-term campaign great. But let's give the listeners some ideas of the techniques that help a campaign reach that goal. Because I think what happens, I think a lot of people, certainly myself, as a game master, have said, I want to run a really long-term campaign, and I just couldn't quite get there. And sometimes that was me, sometimes it was the group, sometimes it was, just circumstance, like the holidays and momentum and those things we talked about before. But what are some techniques if you want to get to that long-term campaign? What are some techniques you can use to get there?
Well, I want to jump in real fast because Michael brought up one earlier that is actually in our outline called blue booking. This is my first time hearing that term.
Oh, yeah. Blue booking is awesome.
I'm kind of curious what exactly that means. I mean, you said campaign journal kind of things.
Michael's probably the best one to talk about this.
Yeah.
Michael, what's blue booking?
Blue booking is the term that we've adopted for character interaction between play sessions via email. This can be origin stories. We have a mailing list for our different gaming groups, and Shadows Angeles has its own little mailing list via Yahoo. And when this first started, everybody some of us, actually, I'm sorry, let me back up. This got started when I was running the Kaze 5 as a tabletop game before it became a play-by-mail. But we had the idea of in-between play sessions for characters to do things, and it was written as prose because some of us had been involved in an earlier play-by-mail game called Crossover Earth, which had a couple of people in it you may have heard of, like Scott Benny.
He's a friend of the show and former guest, Scott Benny.
Yes, and turns were submitted and figured out, but you wrote as a prose story what happens. So the two people who were involved would get together and they would write their two superheroes battling it out, and whoever won would win. And some of us were familiar with that, so we started doing that when I ran Kaze 5 as a tabletop game. And when Ross started Shadows Angeles, we kind of came to him and said, we do this thing called blue booking, and we want to, maybe do some interaction between turns. And in some cases, some of us just sat down and they wrote, like I wrote Jama after the first session, staggering into the washroom, and I described how she's covered in blood and gore and goop and slime and feels completely wretched. But we also wrote origin stories and things, little things of us like walking into the police station for the first day and finding out where we're supposed to be. And over time,
so Blue Booking's
grew.
So Blue Booking's basically just you as players without necessarily interaction from the GM, but kind of extending the scene a little bit and showing a little bit more about what's happening to the character or how they feel, or even just two characters talking to each other. Something that maybe couldn't take place at the table or would be awkward to take place at the table. You do that through an email interaction.
So basically it's all the crap I always do in campaigns, but my GMs don't really appreciate for some reason.
Well, like our blogs for Rafe and Babysitter would technically count. But in Shadows Angels, it grew, and we just kept writing more stories and more stories. And hell, the GM, I even got into like writing like, and here's a little thing that happens before we start tonight's game, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
To give you an idea how it was, there were a total of 7 players, usually about 6 players. There were usually 6 players at any one time, 7 players total. With Ross, that makes 8 people. Over the course of about 1 year, we wrote 8,000 emails or something like that. The numbers were ridiculous.
Well, we're talking 24 sessions and like 90 different stories.
96 different stories.
Yeah. I think I said it was Ross, like hundreds of megs on the website or something you guys had.
It's a lot. And then when Ross started Shadows Angeles 2, before he had even run a session, there had been 21 origin stories, and Ross wrote some snippets introducing some of the villains. You know, one of the guys decided his character from the previous campaign had died, so there was a funeral scene. There was like 3 or 4 little side bits where the characters argued and talked, and new characters are introduced, and they met old characters, and all of this stuff going on. 21 little blue book stories before we'd even sat down and thrown dice on the table.
Now, Jake Burgess, friend of the show and former guest, who's talked to us about artwork a while back, he's actually doing this in my Birthright game right now, where he'll send out little. Michael would call them omake, which is basically little vignettes of him talking in character to some of the other characters and just sort of discussing what had happened in the last game.
For the non-anime fans out there, the term omake comes from manga and anime, where if they had like 30 seconds to fill in the anime show, or if they had a page to fill, or even just in the margins, the mangaka would draw little things or little short vignettes.
Yeah. So I love Blue Booking, and I definitely recommend it. It's a great way to keep that energy, as we talked about, going, keep that momentum going between your characters.
It sounds like something that would be great for when we're talking about one of the pitfalls of a long campaign is the dreaded, the holidays are coming up, or finals are coming up, or
doldrums,
someone's going on summer vacation when you're not going to be playing regularly like you used to. You're still going to have your phone with you. You're still going to have your laptop with you. You're still going to have your tablet with you. Play out a session in email, write a short story.
Well, it doesn't have to be a session. It could just be like he was saying, I want to talk about how my character felt after that last battle.
By session, I meant like just a conversation in character.
Sure. Yeah,
yes.
Well, it can be any of those things. And then this is an important note, to keep a record of all this, to keep an idea of what this is all going on, it's important to have, Michael, a campaign website.
Yeah.
Talk to us about a campaign website.
I do actually. I'm going to look at. Actually, if you give me a second here, I am going to jump to one of the websites, and I'll tell you some of the things I think that we put into ours. So I'm looking at the original Shadows Angeles Tales of the Ninth Squad website. It includes
a record of all the characters.
Yep, it includes record of all the characters. It includes all of Ross's little background articles and notes. It includes the soundtracks and the timeline that we put together. Equipment. It includes character sheets. It includes session recaps. It includes all 90 stories. It includes pictures and other little elements. It becomes a pretty serious and important archive that, when you're kind of bored, or you're like me, I'd be bored sometimes at work, not having anything to do in IT, like right around this time, I would go and read past stories, and it would kind of go, oh yeah, I remember that. That was really cool. I liked what we did there.
Or you'd find a picture that represents an NPC or a monster, and you'd throw it up on the site and be like, hey guys, here's what I think so-and-so looks like.
Right. And other people would contribute, and that's another way to keep the thing going, because it quantifies what you've been doing, and it makes you realize, we've accomplished an awful lot. We've done an awful lot. And I think that helps keep the enthusiasm going, because it takes your actions out of a possible vacuum as you perceive it, and it sort of puts it down, and you kind of get a sense of scale.
Well, it also opportunities like for things like Daryl's guys who are like, man, this dude keeps coming back to life. What are we going to do about that? Right? It gives you an opportunity to start planning things. Although that can be done just over email, but a campaign website can be helpful to kind of keep track of what's been done so far, especially if you want to do that in character and discuss it in character or make plans or make, preparations, those kinds of things.
And you can also, it also helps for those who are plumbers, as I believe Aaron Olson described it, who want to really investigate what's going on. You can start looking around, and you can start, rereading old stuff, taking a look at GM vignettes that he's posted about things that are going to happen before a game, and start trying to mine things for information. So it can fulfill a lot of different needs. It's not hard to put together. You can use there's a lot of simple, you can do it in WordPress quite easily.
Obsidian Portal offers opportunities to make a campaign website very easily.
I used wikia.com for one of my games.
Yeah. And LiveJournal, of course.
Yes. You can actually even do it with a limited access Facebook, but not everybody's on Facebook, so that might be a bit of a problem.
And of course, we had a lot of versatility out of our free Yahoo group that we made for.
Yeah. In fact, Yahoo groups, I'm not sure about how Google does it, but Yahoo groups, you can actually, if you're willing to work at it, you can archive all the pictures and stories and everything, pops in text form, just simple text. But you can, in the file section, you can put everything in there, and make it a one-stop. Here's everything we need to know, archived and placed.
Now, of course, is Yahoo Groups still around?
Yeah, Google Groups, I think, now is a thing.
No, it's still Yahoo.
Well, I think there's also a Google Groups.
Yeah, there is one of those as well.
I just remember reading something a while back about Yahoo Groups was being shut down or something about 2 years ago.
We talked earlier about how important continuity is in a long-term game, but the downside of continuity is it can get a little unwieldy from time to time. So I would say something can help your campaign out is using recaps. A brief.
So Lord Regis has returned. Who?
Well, it can be just at the start of the game. You say, when we last left our heroes, and just have a few bullet points of the things that they did last time that are important for the upcoming adventure. Like you say, Lord so-and-so's returned. Who is that guy? Well, if you have a recap before saying he's that, that you were hired by Lord so-and-so to do these things, they'll say, oh yeah, that guy.
I think, in fact, depending on the type of campaign you're running, you can actually really get the sense across. Like, for example, Shadows Angelus was quite obviously a Japanese anime series. So on a previous episode, the other thing I think you can do too with those recaps is you can play the, I can't remember the term is, but you can say, as this Lord Regis is, you do the recap or you do the info dump, but you kind of lampshade it. So I'm telling you something you already know, but the listeners or the players don't know this. You can help with that.
Absolutely. What are some other ways you can help keep things fresh and avoid burnout in a long-term campaign?
Take a break. I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but I think if the GM is feeling burned, but he's burned because he just needs a break, take a break, play something else for 6 sessions, energize your mind, gather your notes, then go, hey, I'm ready to go back. And if you can
there's ways to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's just say there's ways to do that without stopping everything. And I was going to say a good example is actually something we did, again, in Shadows Angelus, where I needed a break, and I asked Michael to run the next session. So we didn't stop playing Shadows Angelus. I just took out myself as a GM and put someone else in for a single session to give myself a little extra time. You remember that?
Yes. Yeah, and that's actually that's actually a way to do it too. Let the other players do a side story in the same setting, and it gives you a chance to play and gives them a chance to play in the setting as GM. That would work very well. Could work very well.
I would also recommend if you can find a board game that's vaguely related to what you're doing. For example, if you're playing a political game in Waterdeep, Lords of Waterdeep. If you're playing something that's very arena gladiator oriented in Dark Sun,
Spartacus.
If you are playing something that's more along the lines of Birthright, where it's more big war campaign, Breakout Risk.
Or if you're playing something like Shadowrun and you're, kind of searching for information or something along those lines, Netrunner.
Or Shadow
Hackers.
What's the Shadowrun?
Shadowrun Crossfire.
Crossfire, that's the one. Or hopefully coming out very soon, Sprawlgangers.
Yes, hopefully coming out soon.
I think actually another thing is to shake things up. Consider a time jump. Consider a time skip.
I did exactly that.
Consider, like maybe just give everybody a couple of levels and say, okay, you know what? Let's jump forward a little bit. We're grinding through and some lower levels. And you know what? I really want you guys to be a high enough level to run this cool module that I have. So let's just do a time skip and we'll kind of, spend a session figuring out what people have been doing and where they went. But let's jump it forward a little bit and move things along if we feel we're stuck in a rut.
And you don't even have to go that far. One thing that I did, I've talked about this before on the show, so I'm going to be brief, but I have 3 things I do when my players start to annoy me in a game. And this was starting to happen. I wanted to run a big heroic campaign, and I wanted to run like Into the Darkness and the Vault of the Drow and all that stuff. And they showed up with evil characters. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just do, they're fighting a bigger evil. You can't take over the world till I've done it. Sort of game. And it was starting to get frustrating. It was weighing me down. So I'm like, okay, let's shake things up a little bit. There's 3 ways I typically do that. 1, I run a one-shot. Some other game system, something else. One thing that's great if you're a DM and your players are they're getting a little stir crazy and they're starting to go off the rails a little bit, run a game of Paranoia and take your frustrations out on them.
Or Fiasco.
Fiasco is another good one for doing that, and it also allows you to play because it's a DM-less game. The other trick I do is, this one is more of okay guys, I'm done with this campaign. You walk into this cave and you see a green demon's head with a mouth of pure black in it, and basically I run them through Tomb of Horrors. But the third one, and this is the one I took, was, okay, you guys are in the caves of the Underdark and you're walking around, and there's a fog down here, and you walk out, all of a sudden you're in a forest. And I dumped them in Ravenloft for about 3 or 4 sessions. Because it just completely shook everything up. They went from a kind of dungeon crawly exploration, political fighting the drow thing to, oh hey, now we're doing Ravenloft. Completely different. And it kind of reinvigorated things. And then I had the Mists send them right back, a weekend in hell, as they called it back in the day. And it worked really well. It let them grind out a few levels because they were kind of worried for blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's a really good way to do it. I have a couple of quick stories I want to share about that as well. I was running a superhero game back in the day, and I had some friends of mine, and we were just playing it all the time. And I had reached a point where I was like, oh, God, I'm starting to get burned out. So I sat down and I said, I don't really want to do another adventure with these guys. And I passed out a bunch of cards, index cards, that I had written down information on. And the next game we started up, I handed those out, and everybody was like, oh, they were playing their evil doppelganger in the alternate universe. We started the game in the mirror universe, and they were playing as themselves but evil, trying to break through that barrier and go back to the main and invade the main campaign setting.
That's something else. I did something very similar to that. In that same Pathfinder game, I needed to info dump a bunch of stuff on them, but I didn't want to I couldn't figure out a way to get it to them in any way, shape, or form. So I had them all, okay, you guys are asleep, and when you wake up, okay, here are your characters. You're playing this, you're playing this. And I handed out we were playing a Pathfinder game. I handed out a bunch of 4th edition character sheets. And they were playing the drow from 100 years back that they had been fighting this whole time. So they were now the PCs in this flashback dream sequence. And it was just a one-shot campaign, completely different rules set, so it wasn't as nearly as brain fried trying to remember Pathfinder rules, because now I was trying to remember 4th edition rules, which for some reason are completely different pathways in my brain, but it really helped.
Yeah, it doesn't, you can just change the tone even with your one shot or your quick change. Like I did a very similar thing in a Birthright game that I'd been running a while back, where we had gotten some very serious, very deep political stuff. And the next game I handed out, everybody was playing a goblin, and all they were trying to do was get from point A to point B, survive long enough to get there. right? And it was a complete different tone shift. It was all about having fun and laughing and just kind of screwing around. Or there was another time when I just basically had them all run afoul of a particular trickster, and they were all shrunk down to 4 inches high, and the whole adventure was about them getting back to full size.
And
right?
if
It's just a tonal shift.
If you're playing Shadowrun and you've got a very big black trenchcoat mirror shades campaign going on where it's all sorts of deep stuff, food fight.
Or a trip to the metaplanes.
That too.
Either way, yeah. I have an adventure specifically for that called All Elves Go to Heaven. Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
This came out of a time when I was pitching a series of adventures to Catalyst that were all Mohawk. And it was going to be a series of adventures called Mohawks. Mohawk number 1 was All Elves Go to Heaven. Mohawk number 2 was Send in the Trolls, so forth and so on. It was going to be great. But yeah, so keeping it fresh, that's a big deal. What about the play-by-email stuff that we're talking about, or the quick solo adventures? How are some ways you can use these things during things like the holidays or finals weeks to keep people on track?
One of the things you can do is you can let the players resolve questions or investigate issues that might drag in an actual face-to-face game, but keep them interested, advance the plot, and let them accomplish goals, and that they can come back here and come back to the table. Well, I did this, and that helps move things forward a little bit. But yeah, I'd certainly keep everybody. It's a way to keep people bring their minds back to the game without actually everybody's unable to make it to the game. Well,
this could be something as simple as you send an email out with a simple question like, "What does your character feel about X?" Right? Just have someone think about it during the downtime so that their mind is still working on that topic. And one other thing I want to bring up is, of course, this is what made Paizo so popular and powerful as a company, is it did these things called adventure paths. So it was like you were getting on the ground floor of a long-term campaign because you knew that this was a path that was going to go for 8, 10, 12. I think some of their paths go as far as 15 or 16.
They usually go 1 to at least 16th to 20th level, somewhere around in there. They're
yeah.
It's like it's usually they launch one every year, and it's 6 adventures. And we're talking adventures. They're like 64 to 128 page adventures that they release like every other month.
So this is kind of like getting your players together and letting them know right off the bat that this is intended to be a long-term campaign. This can also be true for things like mega dungeons. Like if you say, if I went to you, Daryl, and said, "Hey, I want to run a game where we are exploring Undermountain," the original Undermountain.
Mm-hmm.
You would be like, "Wow, that's a long-term campain."
When?
Right?
When are you running this for me?
But you see what I'm saying, right?
No, I just did the exact same thing with my local group. I wanted to do I've been playing so many games online recently, aside from the game I've been playing with my friend James, that I have been wanting to run a game in person again. It's been a long time. So I flat out told everyone, "Hey guys, I'm going to run the Emerald Spire," which is something I brought up on our Dungeon Crawls episode, is what I think is one of the best mega dungeons out there. It is level 1 to 14. And I warned them, this is what it is. This is the type of characters you can play. And I think it's going to fit them because this is mostly the same group that played in my Evil campaign. And again, starts off in a lawful evil city. So it might suit them a little bit better. I don't know.
And again, I want to point out one we've talked about briefly back when we had Rich Baker on the show. It's called The Red Hand of Doom. And it is just a brilliant 3.5 3rd edition not really mega dungeon, but it's sort of an adventure path in one single
it's like
volume.
Strung together adventures.
Yeah, they're really good.
And of course, the quintessential example of that is Queen of the Demon Web. Queen of the Spiders. That was the GDQ modules back in 1st edition.
Yeah, wow, that is reaching way back, but those are linked. It's true, and if you say to someone, "We're going to play all of them," that again kind of sets up the idea that you're doing we're going to be doing this for a while, guys. We're getting on the train, and the train is going to take us a long way.
And that can actually help out players when they're trying to make characters, because it lets them know right up front, you don't have to front load your character. You can plan for the long term. You can make a character that's going to be a little bit weaker at 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th level, because you're setting up something. This is for the guys who are the more crunchy oriented people. Let them know, hey, you're going to work towards something. When you get to 8th, we're going to 8th, 10th, 12th, 15th level. So you can plan long term on this. Play the long game.
Well, that's also true, though, for the character stories themselves. And this is something I really like to do, is I like to make sure that the characters are driving the stories. It's about pacing, and it's about investment, and it's about agency. But it all kind of boils down to letting the characters say, what do you guys want to do? Right? What's important to you? Maybe that's just an email question you send out to somebody, but it can also be a thing of when you're going to take that first adventure even and bring it to a close. You make sure that there's an opening there that the player characters can say, maybe Lord Regis did get away, but I have, that son of a bitch, he owes me money. We're going to go after him, right? And the GM doesn't say, no, you can't. The GM's like, oh, yeah, that sounds good, right? So if they're thinking about if the story is being driven by the characters, that's also going to help the campaign last longer because it's going to keep them invested in what's going to happen next and what they want to do next.
And another trick you can do during that downtime, if you're wanting to do that play by email kind of thing, is literally make downtime in the campaign. It's like, okay, you guys have cleared out the Dungeon of MacGuffin. You guys are going to we're not coming back for 3 weeks. You guys have 3 weeks. And then when you break up and go everywhere else, send out emails saying, okay, what do you guys do during the downtime? And I've kind of been dominating this. Michael, do you have anything?
Well, hang on. Before you get off that topic, there is, in fact, a product by Evil Beagle Games called Day in the Life, Gaming the Downtime. And it is an excellent product. It's very cheap right now on DriveThruRPG. It is $5, okay? But it's a great book on how to, in fact, turn your downtime in the game into a game itself, where the player characters can be like saying things like, I'm going to go out and carouse, or I'm going to go out and find rumors about where Lord Regis may be hiding. And it can be that great opportunity for them to start blue booking with some mechanical backup for that.
And it's a great time to have someone who actually likes playing Deckers but doesn't play one in Shadowrun because it sucks up too much time for the earlier editions of the game. Oh, hey, I'm going to make a Decker character that's going to be a contact for us, and he's going to do all the research for us.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that was really important in Shadows Angelus as far as this goes was downtime itself. Like, I made a conscious decision not to have places where it ended on a cliffhanger very often. I did. I mean, there were occasional cliffhangers, but most of the time I would bring an adventure to a point and say, okay, you guys are now kind of on your own until we pick up again, the next day or when they get out of the hospital. Being in the hospital was a big part of Shadows Angelus because they got beat up pretty bad. There were quite a few stories of them going, okay, I'm in the hospital for the next 5 days. Okay, I'm going to write about what happens to me. So, but having this downtime was that opportunity. Michael, can you comment on that?
I think Ross can attest that, especially toward the later end of the game when things got very intense, the Shadows Angelus campaign, when things got very intense and we had a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to decide upon, one or two players or sometimes three players would be talking, and he would hear like, yeah, let's do this over email. We can figure this out. We can argue. We can do X. We can discuss something. And it would the players could then come to a resolution about a problem that maybe had cropped up late, or that had been sitting on their shoulders during the session, and they could come back to the session with the issue resolved. I also know that in one of the follow-up Shadows Angelus campaigns, we had been presented with a problem, but the GM had given us no solutions. He was waiting to see what we did, and he later stated that one of the sessions that came after that was solely because players were blue booking back and forth, and the decision was made, well, we're going to do X. And he's like, okay, I better write something that lets them do X, because that's not what I was planning on, but they've decided on a different course of action. So I think the downtime, like how much time do we have between this session? You think the next session will let people decide what they can do, especially if blue booking is really taken off, and they can go, okay, we can do this. We can talk about this. We can write that, and they can plan their actions and come back to you, maybe an email. I'm gonna work on this, or they can tell you what they're going to do before you wrap up for the night, and you can sort of use the downtime and what they say they're going to do during the downtime to prep answers and material information that you can give to them, maybe by email or maybe during the next session.
And that's a really good dirty DM trick to pull that Michael just brought up. And this is just general, whether you're running short-term or long-term. If it's multiple sessions strung together, especially if you're doing anything that's kind of open world or the players are driving what comes up, don't wait until the next session. Okay, so what are you guys going to do? And start off the session with that. No, ask them at the end of the session. Okay, we have now completed what you set out to do this session. What are you going to do next? Find out what they're doing, and that then gives you a lead to prep for the next game.
Yeah, so it's helpful for both the players who now are thinking about and getting invested in what they want to do next. It's also helpful for you as a GM to kind of plan out what's going to happen then, right? Well, I actually used this really great in Shadows Angelus 2, which was our second run, because they had built up all of this writing ahead of time in these blue books that we talked about what they wanted to do. They were going to track down why this one guy was missing, and they had basically set their entire focus on, we are going to find out why this one guy is missing. And it allowed me to pull a really fun in medias res opening with the player characters suddenly finding themselves on top of a hurtling monorail transport car with the weakest member of the party holding someone barely dangling off the edge, saying, "Don't let me fall. I know where Malachi Brogan is." Right? And they were all like,
Yes.
they were all just stunned, and they looked at me and they were like, "That's awesome!" Because it was so different from what they had built up in their head of what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
In medias res is something that's really hard to pull off in RPGs.
Oh,
but
so hard.
It is
So hard.
so great when you can do it. And that is a good trick to do to be able to pull that off.
Well, I think we're getting close to the end here. The barkeep, Mac, has given me the eye, and the Imperial Guard will be stopping by soon. So I'm going to go ahead and ask us to kind of give our final thoughts on long-term campaigns.
Well, there's one type of long-term campaign that we haven't really brought up, and that's kind of the living world campaigns.
Okay.
And there's one specific example. I just got done today editing the episode where we talked about, this will give you an example about how far behind I am on editing right now, but I just edited when we had Sean Patrick Fannin on talking about the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and we talked about what was going on with Justice in Life.
Right.
And that, to me, is the quintessential long-term campaign, not only because it is the sort of campaign you can play the same characters over and over and keep building on it, but it also gives you that communal feeling, because I play my game here in Orange, Texas. Ross plays his game in Denver, and our two games still affect each other. It can affect the world.
Yeah,
So-
living campaigns are a good way to do that long-term thing as well. There's I think Pathfinder is Pathfinder Society,
Mhm.
and there's Dungeons & Dragons Encounters.
They changed it to Adventure League.
Adventure League, sorry. What are some other ones that are out there?
Didn't Shadowrun have a living campaign for a while?
Shadowrun has missions, and then there's the unofficial one, which is Runner Hub that we talked about before.
Yeah, Runner Hub on Reddit. By all means, if you are a Shadowrun fan, go check out Runner Hub on Reddit.
Yeah, because they actually, you want to talk about direct interaction, I think that they are probably the best at it right now, aside from possibly Justice in Life and Shinetar, because of just how much the fan base is all behind it and how much they contribute to building the world.
Absolutely. Daryl, what are your final thoughts on long-term campaigns?
If you can do one, please do. Like I said, it's not something, sometimes you can usually plan for a long-term campaign and have it fall apart on you. If you take all the advice that we've given you, it hopefully will help you stick a group together long enough to make it to those long-term campaigns, because it is so rewarding when you pull that off. If you think it's awesome going through a dungeon and beating the end boss of it, you have no idea compared to, I have been working for 15 sessions to get to this asshole and I finally get to stick a sword in his ass. Hell yeah. It is so rewarding. It is so fulfilling to be able to, both as a player, play in that sort of campaign, as well as a DM run that sort of campaign where you see these changes slowly happen as opposed to having to rush everything. It is absolutely amazing. If you have not had a chance to run a long-term campaign that really has that sort of story arc to it, please do it.
Okay. I'm going to give my final thoughts, and I'm going to ask Michael to give his final thoughts on it. I think that long-term campaigns, as I said before, are my favorite way to play. And I just want to encourage everyone who hasn't tried it before to give it a shot, because I think, as we pointed out, there's a lot of really rewarding things in a long-term campaign. again, they're not the end all be all. And if you love the short term, there's nothing wrong with that. But there is just so many great memories that I have of the characters and the situations and the stories that I can bring to you from the long-term campaigns and how they can kind of build a community, kind of like Shadows Angelus or Shinetar has. I just think you should give it a try. So there's that. Michael?
I really think you guys have both covered a lot of what I would say. My experiences with long-term campaigns have been pretty much positive. I think you find one that's really gelling and things are going well. Like our Shadows Angelus game, try to run that out to a good logical conclusion. Have a good overall campaign concept and arc and story. Get your players invested, and it'll build on itself, and it will. You'll end up with a lot of great memories, a lot of great gaming stories, a lot of great characters and moments. It's worthwhile trying at least once. Something 16, 20, 24 sessions with a concrete overall story that you're going to try to present to everybody. And if you put some good work into it, you'll be rewarded with some phenomenal gaming results.
All right. Michael, if people want to know more about you and what your latest thing is, can you tell us about that and where they can find out more about you on the web?
My website is Surbrook Stuff. Just put that into Google. Hit I Feel Lucky. You pretty much go to it.
You can also check the show notes of this episode, and we'll have a link.
Absolutely.
Yes. Also, you can look me up, Michael Surbrook, on Facebook. I'm often talking, when I can talk about what I'm doing, I will talk about my latest gaming projects, especially if publisher is like, yeah, hype it up, please. So if you were a Hero fan, you got to hear an awful lot about what was going into Fantasy Hero Complete as I was developing it.
What else is on your plate, if you could talk about it?
Now that I'm done with Fantasy Hero Complete, I believe it's okay to mention that I will be working on adapting with some co-writers and some co-authors and developers the old Australian Games Association setting of Lace and Steel for Fantasy Craft.
All right. That is excellent.
I was able to get a hold of Paul Kidd. I wrote him a very nice proposal letter. We talked to Fantasy Craft or Crafty Games at Gen Con. And in fact, the 28th, we will be getting together so I can show him the outline I wrote, and we'll be making decisions. And we'll hopefully have a manuscript and such. I don't know about it'll be published, but we'll have a manuscript hopefully by next Gen Con for them to look at.
That is brilliant. Now, Paul Kidd, of course, is the novelist who wrote a bunch of great books for TSR and Wizards of the Coast.
He wrote, in fact, Daryl probably has heard of the book or knows the campaigns he wrote about. He wrote White Plume Mountain, Descent into the Depths of the Earth, and Queen of the Demon Web Pits.
And they're all excellent novels.
Those sound slightly familiar.
Well, the novels are just phenomenal. And please, if you do me a favor, tell Paul Kidd that I am just an enormous fan.
Yes, I actually have my copies, and I've actually picked up through Lulu a couple of his other books. He is an excellent writer, and I do have his Lace and Steel novel, which I highly recommend for those who want a neat take on Musket and Pike, Three Musketeers fantasy. It's called Muss of Curbridge, and it was actually a fun read and gave a nice, neat take on a fantasy setting that's much different from a lot of the more traditional stuff we're seeing out there right now.
Is that all you can talk about at this time, or is there more?
No. You may have, I think on some past shows, I've mentioned a product called Larger Than Life. Larger Than Life Adventures in American Folklore is my examination of 20 major archetypes of American history from 1700 to 1900. This includes the pirate, the backwoodsman, the continental soldier, the blue water sailor, the occupational hero, the lumberjack, the lawman, and on and on and on and on. That's been written, it's been finished, it's been edited. It will be going to Kickstarter early next year, so we can print not only a Hero edition, not only a Mutants and Mastodons edition, but a Savage Worlds edition.
All right.
One of each.
That is excellent.
In addition, my Ghosts, Ghouls, and Golems book, which is a guide to primarily European supernatural lore, but it also includes Wendigo and the Arabic Ghoul and Jack the Ripper and Greys and Mothman and even Slender Man.
Ooh, are the Black Eyed Kids in there?
No, I couldn't find enough about him.
Oh,
unfortunately.
I love the Black Eyed Kids.
I know it was. I picked 6 characters. I have Men in Black, Mad Gassers, Greys, Slender Man, and Mothman, who were in there.
Okay.
And I just couldn't find enough on Black Eyed Kids to get that I felt confident in doing justice to the urban legends and the myths and the stories to do anything in the book form.
Sequel hook.
But yeah, but that book will be undergoing the same treatment. So that will be coming out.
Wait, so I'm going to get to put Slender Man in my Savage Worlds game?
Yes.
Oh.
And for those who know my output,
that's my Halloween 2015 game, folks.
And for those who are familiar with my hero system work, I will tell you right now that, and for those who are familiar with Kaze 5 and the character point totals of a couple characters in there, Slender Man is the single most expensive published character I've ever written up for Hero.
Wow.
Jesus.
He is just devastating after I went through a couple of wikis on what his character and his origins and such were like. That is what I can talk about right now. I will say that I hope in the first quarter or so of next year to be able to contact you guys by Facebook or such and say, by the way, I have this coming up. And but that's all I can say about it right now. I've got a tantalizing email that I said yes to, but I can't say anything more.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be awesome and exciting, and I hope you'll let us know when you can talk about that.
Yes, I can. And as a last note to Daryl, if you're going to be at Genghis Con or at Gen Con, I will be running a Shadows Angeles adventure called Shadows Angeles, The House on Shambles Row.
That was going to be my final thoughts is, when do I get to play Shadows Angeles?
I don't know if Ross is going to be running. I don't know if Ross is going to be running a game of it at Genghis Con, and I don't know if he's going to run a special. Maybe Ross can run another Gen Con special like he did last year. But I took the first 2 sessions of the 9-session game that I ran, condensed it down, edited it, and we're going to be using the pre-generated characters that we've that have been used in a number of the Genghis Khan games, and I've tried to make sure that of the 6 characters, at least 3 get a lot of focus that haven't gotten a lot of focus before. But yes, you can try and see what the world is like.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to make Genghis Khan, but I've already made plans for Gen Con already. I'm sitting here. We were on the subreddit for Gen Con planning out our getting a hotel room strategy with a bunch of people today.
Awesome.
Actually, Daryl, I am looking for a room, so if you want a roommate who's not very quiet and very
well, my last roommate at Gen Con had a CPAP machine, but I was so blitzed most of the nights whenever I finally passed out at 4 a.m. That was not a problem. However, I'm severely curbing my drinking this year. So,
well, we're going to be recording, I'm sure, at Gen Con just like we did last year. So
yes.
It's going to be really cool. We're going to have and of course, Michael was in that Gen Con show.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing that again, and I'm looking forward to it. But again, we need to wrap up here, so guys. So on behalf of the Gamers Tavern, that is Daryl and myself, I want to extend our gratitude to Mike Surbrook for joining us tonight. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
And on behalf of the Gamers Tavern, including Michael Surbrook, I want to wish all of our listeners a very happy holidays, Merry Christmas, New Year's, depending on whatever you get this episode out. We're wishing you a Merry Christmas anyway. So Merry Christmas from the Gamers Tavern. And until next time, may all your hits be crits. 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 Your hits be crits.